welcome back to Reunited States, the podcast where we aim to bring back civil discourse to our national dialogue. From Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Ehrig.
And from Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And we're going to kick it off right away talking about the bigger news from this past week, and that was the passing of Pope Francis. Kind of surprising, though he had a lot of health complications, as we understood the last year or so of his life. One of the last things he did was meet J.D. Vance, although there is no relation between that and his death, I think.
That we know of.
That we know of. We hope there's no relation.
It would be enough to make me want to drop dead.
Yeah, he saw that and he was like, I'm done. But no, it shocked the world, especially, those of us that are Christian or Catholic are likely very affected by this. But I won't spend too much time talking about the Pope, other than I think it's important to recognize just how much Pope Francis did for the Catholic faith in terms of pushing more progressive agendas for the church. Progressive agendas that the church has never touched before, not in the way we had during Pope Francis's time. The push for LGBTQ inclusion, the push for more humanitarian respect for the world, global concerns over pollution and things like that, and global warming, all things that were previously not really spoken about, or if they were, there was a very conservative, of course, approach to that, something you'd likely expect of the Catholic Church as a whole. But Pope Francis kind of put a lot of that on its head with things he has said that has, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, really rattled the bones of a lot of more conservative minds in the faith. I'm personally very grateful for the amount of progress that the church has had because of Pope Francis and his ideas and beliefs. And I hope that the next pope that we get kind of, continues to push that same agenda. I think there's a chance we can go either way with the next pope. If you guys don't know, the pope is selected in a secret meeting, a secret vote made by the papal conclave, a collection of cardinals who vote in secret. And when they have voted, they will release a smoke signal from the Sistine Chapel. If it's white, they successfully chose a pope, and if it's black, they have not successfully chosen a pope. It's kind of odd, but I guess this way they've been doing it for, generations now. So
what if it's pink smoke? What does that mean?
If it's pink smoke, then the unbelievable has happened, and we elected a female pope. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, seriously though, what that's my thing. Can you imagine just if somebody got in there and was like, it would be really funny just to kind of mess with people a little bit and just put up
it's a girl,
some other different type of color of smoke, right? Exactly, blue smoke, whatever. It's and everyone's like, what does this mean? Everyone.
They kicked on the doors. Everyone's gone. It's a completely empty Sistine Chapel. No, that's it's funny. It is funny, kind of to look at a lot of these practices. Almost as funny as looking at their clothing. But I do want to highlight that there are a few contenders that I think people have been talking about that are, next to, or potentially next in line to be voted to become the next pope. And again, this is a pretty important decision to kind of think about. Regardless of what faith you might follow or faith you don't follow, the Catholic Church is one of the biggest churches in the world, and as a result, the leader of that church has a very significant presence and responsibility in world affairs, regardless of the faith you follow. And I think, especially here in America, the direction that the church goes to has huge impacts on the direction that America might be going to next, provided that we still follow the faith as we claim to, right? But there's a few folks out there that are kind of like, some are concerning, some are hopeful. There are actually two candidates out of the Philippines that I think both of them are pretty good options, both more progressive minded, in agreement with a lot of what Pope Francis was saying about inclusiveness, very like, anti-war crimes, which is apparently something we're going to have to be mindful of in the near future. Something I particularly thought was interesting was one of them, who is Cardinal Pablo David. He is currently the Bishop of Caloocan, if I pronounced that right. When he was in the Philippines, he was preaching against the drug war killings made by Rodrigo Duterte when he was president, if you remember that name.
Oh, my favorite. Yeah. My favorite guy.
And he was facing death threats and criminal charges from Duterte's government. And he continued to just kind of like, preach out or speak out against a lot of what he was doing. So I personally like that story a lot. I think folks that kind of like face that level of persecution and continue to like fight against tyranny of that sort is an attribute that I commend greatly. So folks that I'm kind of looking at hoping to succeed, there's a lot of names on that list that are, much more like conservatively minded, are likely to roll back a lot of the ideas of inclusiveness, especially with the LGBTQ community that Pope Francis had talked about. Hoping they aren't selected, but again, we don't know what's going to happen. But something to keep in mind. Something to think about and look at for the foreseeable future. Again, because even if you're not part of that faith and the actual pope or who that person is doesn't matter to you personally, it does make a pretty big difference to world politics and on the world stage. And as we talk a lot about bringing people together and the communication of different people, not just in our country but across the world, the leader of these poignant religious groups is really important to kind of furthering those communications and bringing people together that way.
I think we're all just hoping for the best, and look, Francis was very popular with some people, and not so popular with others.
He is Pope-ular.
Yes, exactly. Francis will leave a legacy, certainly, as having changed the kind of direction of the church in some ways, and it wasn't always popular. It was very divisive, and there are many figures within the Catholic Church who want to kind of, who are very critical of his beliefs and more progressive ideologies and want to kind of revert back. It'll be interesting to see, because there has been a lot of lobbying within the power structure of the Catholic Church among people who are very critical of Francis to try and set themselves up for power going forward. But we shall see. It will be interesting, regardless of what happens, though. Francis will leave a very significant legacy. And also, we should note, came into the position at a very difficult time for the Catholic Church in the aftermath of what was an incredibly troubling period relating to the sex scandals, the molestation scandals, and kind of the potential cover-ups that existed relating to that that came to light in the early part of this 21st century. So, a lot of kind of uncertainty, but we're just gonna see what color the smoke is. When there's smoke, there's fire. I find the smoke thing to be interesting. It is an interesting way. You would think that in 2025 they could simply just, put out a press release, as they do, maybe make a tweet. But the smoke, we're looking for the smoke. So, anyway, but regardless of that, grateful for for Pope Francis's service, and may he rest in peace. So I wanted to talk about something, and I specifically didn't want you to know we were going to talk about this because I wanted to have kind of an open discussion about it because we never really got to discuss it. But I sent you something on Instagram this week, that a conversation between the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, my old job, and Professor Scott Galloway, who you all may have heard of, may or may not know of, who has become kind of a very big figure. I mean, he's on all the podcasts now. He's been on The View. He's been on Good Morning America. He's become kind of a household name. His Prof G podcast is very popular. He's written a whole load of books. And he also has a podcast, I believe called Raging Moderates, if I'm not mistaken, with Kara Swisher, that has become kind of a big deal. And I generally openly admit I like Scott Galloway a lot. Do I think he's probably the nicest guy? Probably not. But I like him a lot. I like a lot of what he has to say. I think he puts forward a very interesting and well-crafted mentality of what masculinity is and what it can be, not just the bad aspects of masculinity that we talk about a lot, that I think get focused on. He's not a Joe Rogan person by any stretch of the imagination. He is very much a kind of defender of the idea of the fact that we need to be putting forth a new model of what masculinity means in America and how it is, and he worries about kind of men in general, young men in particular, and what's going on with young men, not in an effort to bring down women, but in a concern about the mental health of young men, the suicide rates of young men, the economic opportunities of young men, the fact that so many of them are struggling. And so he's not always, he is certainly a controversial figure in some ways, for a variety of reasons. But I sent you a conversation he had with Gavin Newsom. Again, Gavin Newsom is having, a lot of kind of very controversial people on his podcast having very interesting dialogues. And I really actually liked what he said. He essentially said, I'm hopeful for the Democratic Party. And he said, quote, Democrats, we get it wrong, but our heart is in the right place, end quote. He also said, if you're young and you're a good kid, you should be able to get a job that pays a certain wage, should be able to find someone to fall in love with, and you should have a home. We need to build 7 million homes in the next 10 years. We need to stop this identity politics. He said a whole bunch of other things about kind of how the Democratic Party can move forward. But he feels optimistic because he thinks the tariffs are so insanely ridiculous that politically this opens a window. I agreed with all of that. And you had a very different reaction to the video I sent you, and I was really just curious as to why. I guess that's my question to you is, what about what he said I think you used the term pisses you off. What pisses you off?
First off, I have not seen much of any of his other content. So like everything you're talking about, what he says normally and what he advocates for, like I have no idea about that. I don't watch him. I don't read him or whatever. So if he says that stuff, that's great. That's all great. Like I'll check it out some point and I will likely agree with that. And so you sent me the clip in which he talks specifically about the tariffs being an opportunity, and that, and he says very specific, and I'll tell you what exactly pissed me off. It is that exact statement that he says right after that, where he goes, Democrats, we get it wrong sometimes, but our heart's in the right place. And he says something else kind of to the same fact. That's the part that irritates me, because when we talk about like what I see in the Democratic Party a lot and the excuses and the reason, or I guess I should say, the rationale that they use for why they do the things that they do politically, right? It's a lot of that same stuff. It's almost like virtue signaling, where it's like they, they refuse to attack. They refuse to be like, bulldogish in a way from a political perspective, because they rely so much on the fact that their intent is good. And therefore, because they have good intentions, people will just naturally vote for them and naturally, agree with them and elect them into office. They say, well, who doesn't, want to support everybody? Who doesn't want, a higher minimum wage, rights for all groups and all peoples? And to an extent, yeah, sure, that's you have a point. It's like that is, you talk to a lot of people, especially talk to me or you, and yeah, like that would seem like that is a thing that like morally and ethically you'd want. Why would you ever vote against this, right? But obviously, me and you are not the only viewpoint on there, and there's actually a lot of people with the viewpoint that has it such that they wouldn't want to vote for those things. And like Democrats relying on the fact that they have a morally good argument, I say in quotation marks, and that's why they're okay with losing. That's why they're like, oh, you know what, we're good people, and therefore that's all that matters. That's what I get from that statement, and that's the part that pisses me off, because it's not true. That's how you lose elections. That's how we've been losing elections. When all you are doing is relying on being a virtuous person and having virtuous ideas and policies and saying that should be enough, that's a recipe for disaster, because it's not enough. The truth is that is not enough. It is not enough to just be a good person to win an election. It is not enough to have policies that just, are morally nice, right, or ethical, and expect that to just win because it's an ethically good decision. It's a Christ-like thing to do. That is not enough. You can see that. You look at the results, and you can see that is never enough just to rely on your virtue as a way to move forward in our political structure. That is not what people are voting for, a majority of people. So to be ignorant of that fact and to speak like, as if like the more like, offense directed like strategy that you need in politics to win, to ignore that and say, well, that's okay, because we're good people. That's bullshit, dude. Yeah, that's such bullshit. That's how we lose. Okay. That's how we're going to continue to lose. And when we're facing fascism right in our face, like 5 feet away from us, to continue to just kind of like virtue signal yourself and say like, oh, well, I'm happy with myself because I'm a good person, and that's why I'm a Democrat. I'm a good person. Like, no, dude, that's not enough. That's not enough. Like we have to, like, we are facing fascism. You can't just face fascism by saying like, oh, I'm a good person, so it's okay. Like,
see, okay, but this is where I have to butt in, okay, because I agree with everything you just said, but I don't think that's remotely what he was saying there at all. On the contrary, I mean, if you listen to the full clip there, I mean, he goes on to say that, here are the things that the Democratic Party should, in theory, stand for. Again, if you're a young person, you should be able to, get a job that pays a certain wage, should be able to find someone to fall in love with, should be able to build a home. He also calls out the identity politics. He says the Democrats haven't done this, and this. The argument, though, is still at the core, why, and this is for me, why have I not left the Democratic Party? A party that I am immensely irritated with for all the reasons that you just said, because they are so freaking clueless about strategy, and they are not good at winning elections, and it's infuriating that, like, because of their ineptitude at winning elections, people keep getting harmed. But the reality is, the reason I haven't left the Democratic Party is for that same reason. I do believe that the party, even when they get it wrong, even if they are inept at winning elections, their heart is in the right place, and that's a reason that I'm refusing to give up on the Democratic Party. Is that in general, I do believe Democrats want the right things. I just don't think they're especially effective at achieving them.
That is not enough.
That's not what he was saying.
I mean, that's what I got from it. You asked me what I got from it. Now, I agree with you, and I do think that, like, if you were to ask anybody why are you a member of the political party that you are a member of, the answer should always be, at the core, a philosophical one, right? Because I agree with the moral stance that this party has on these issues. It's a philosophical question. It's not anything more than that, or it shouldn't be anything more than that. Someone shouldn't feel like they are leaving the party for another party strictly because of, I don't know, win-loss ratio, right? Like results and things like that. Because then, like, that doesn't make sense. Like, political parties aren't about winning and losing. There are, they are about winning and losing, but they're about winning and losing in a position that is, intrinsically philosophical in nature. You're losing an argument over, like, what is the nature of this or the nature of that, and the difference is the political race. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you can't, like, it makes no sense to leave a party when your, like, when your moral sense, right, like, where you stand philosophically still aligns with that old party, like, then you are a member of that party. That's the way it works.
But you would acknowledge that there are a lot of people doing that with the Democratic Party.
And that is
general.
Weird. That is very weird.
Yeah, I mean, then that's, I guess, what my broader thing was with that. And I, again, I looked at the clip more as a whole, but I do understand the irritation. You make a good point there relating to that specific idea of Democrats who get it wrong, but our heart is in the right place. If that is your sole mentality for the Democrats and you are not able to objectively look at them otherwise, yeah, you're living in a fantasy land. But I also do think that at some point we have to start pushing back on this narrative that, like, oh, the Democrats are super corrupt and I hate them, and no, I still believe in the general principles of the party. And so do many of these people on the left who are, like, abandoning the party to go, like, oh, I hate the Democrats, I don't consider myself a Democrat and whatnot. But you agree with most of the things that they stand for, the vast majority of things.
By definition.
You just don't want to call yourself one because
you're ashamed of whatever. Which I understand that to a degree, but, like, I also feel like, kind of more to your point that you just said, I do feel like the people, and I know people like this, we both do actually, I do feel like the people who say, I don't like any of these parties because they're all corrupt, I do feel like that's kind of an excuse to not dig deeper into, like, support, because, like, at the end of the day, the country's going to be ruled by one of them. Like, are you really just going to, like, be like, well, they're all corrupt, so fuck it, I'm going to go live in Montana or something like that. Like, that just doesn't feel genuine. That feels like an excuse not to get involved in something that affects you and affects everybody else.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. It's a great point. I do think it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out for you not being willing to, like, look at things and get involved. And it is a general avoidance of acknowledging that, like, there is no perfect system. There is no system that is going to be 100% working at all times for everyone. That has not existed because we are human beings. We're not perfect. Like, there is no perfect individual, and as such, there can be no perfect system. But, like, the fact that Democrats spend so much time infighting over stuff like this weakens the party. And this has been always true of progressive and leftist movements throughout all of history. They eat themselves in a way that conservative movements do not. Leftist movements eat themselves. When they grow and they expand and they gain power, they start attacking each other in a way that conservative movements do not. Conservative movements typically get taken down by someone else because they are so wildly unpopular. They become so authoritarian-esque that they get kind of erupted from the inside. Leftist movements have historically, true leftist movements, have almost always eaten themselves and ripped themselves apart, and the right just waits kind of for that to happen typically, and it has happened again. It just continues to happen with us in our country. We cannot get a consensus, and we argue about these small kind of minute policy differences and ways that we engage and the ways that we speak and what language we use and how frequently we use pronouns or things like that. It's the little things that on the grand scheme of things, like, those are not the important issues when we're talking about acceptance and advancing, equality for people in the law, in the legal system. And it pisses people off and it makes us look dysfunctional. When we can't agree on very basic things and when we, squabble over the stupidest things with each other. It makes me wish we had a Ronald Reagan-esque person in our party who could come in and be like, because he was like, the 11th commandment is thou shalt not insult another Republican, or thou shalt not criticize another Republican. Like, there was a mentality of we have to be on the same page. We don't put our dirty laundry out in public. We as a party are unified, and Democrats have never been able to do that.
Yeah, and to go back to something I said earlier about what kind of upset me about that statement is the fact that, like, the Democrats will get too wrapped up in our own moral philosophy and what we believe is right, which creates the infighting, like you mentioned. But it also, like, we don't realize that these are vastly unpopular opinions for most people. But we continue to champion them loudly because we believe they're the right thing to do, right? You're talking like stuff like, when you're talking about trans rights and pronouns, all these things. Like, I mean, I agree. I support the rights of trans folk and usage of pronouns. Like, I agree with all that stuff. I think it is morally correct to advance that agenda, but it is unstrategic to champion it as loudly as Democrats want to do, because it's so unpopular that it's never going to win. So if we want to actually enter a position of power where we can enact legislation to support trans folks, to support any of these stances and platforms that we have to, realize just how, when to turn it off.
Of course.
Right? When to turn off that
100%.
Loudspeaker, and then turn that loudspeaker back on. Once we're in power, once we have the ability to do something about it. That's the strategy. Because right now everything is like, it's like ethical decisions, ethical it's like rights. And that's fine. I agree with all that. But the smart thing would be to champion the rights that are popular, that are very hard to kind of go against across the nation, and maybe don't mention or keep it closer to the chest a lot of your other stances on more divisive topics. Keep those things close to the chest, no matter how good they are wholly and how much you support them. Again, I support all these things. I am a huge supporter of trans rights. I have trans people in my family. But if I were a Democrat at the national stage, I am not going to be saying that with a loudspeaker when I'm trying to get elected. I'm going to keep that close. I'm not going to really talk about it because I don't want people talking about that part when I'm trying to get elected. I'll be talking about other topics that are more popular. And then once I win, if in this scenario you're able to win, at that point in time, once you're the president or whatever you are, senator, at that point in time, you can then start introducing legislation because now you have the power to do these things. Now you can start talking about your trans rights again because now you're in a position to actually do something about it, right?
Case in point, Barack Obama. Barack Obama ran for president in 2008. He was not pro-gay marriage. not publicly. Now, many people would tell you Barack Obama very much cared about the LGBTQ community and wanted to provide rights, but he recognized that as the first black president, and as a Democrat in a window of opportunity to win a lot of races across the country, that was not going to be a winning issue. Obama won the presidency, and what is one of the first things he did? He repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military, which is a huge, huge deal and helped a lot of people who had been unfairly targeted and discharged from the military. We're talking about, members of the military were discharged simply for acknowledging that they were gay, forever acknowledging it. And by the end of that term, what did Obama do? When the politics had kind of turned and the country had led a certain way, Obama came out and acknowledged that he was for gay marriage. And that level of support led again to more and more challenges to it. It gave kind of an okay, but it was because he was in power that he was able to lead that narrative forward.
And then we got gay marriage.
And we got gay marriage at the Supreme Court. And so again, these are the things that you have to do. Sometimes you have to be able to not say exactly what you want. And how often did you hear Donald Trump last year say, or Republicans for years say, that they, were for something or they were against certain something, or, how often did you hear Donald Trump say, hold on, cut. How often did we hear Donald Trump say, I don't know what Project 2025 is. I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is. And then gets into office and he enacts Project 2025. Like that's how you win elections. He distanced himself from something that was going to be immensely unpopular. And then once he had the power to do it, he did it. And so, didn't call it that. So this lack of strategy, you didn't find Republicans running away from him. Even the people that loved Project 2025, they all understood he can't say it out loud that he supports it. They get it.
Even on a more basic philosophical level, the issue on abortion.
Yeah.
Right? You can't tell me Trump's not anti-abortion on paper, right? But what did he do? He didn't go out there. He didn't scream it on the mountaintops that he wanted to make abortion illegal across the country. Of course not. He's smarter than that. That's what Republicans can do that I'm saying Democrats need to learn to do, or else we will continue to lose always, is that Republicans have the intelligence as a party. They know that they are smart enough that they can lie, or not just lie, not even lie, just distance themselves from positions that they legitimately have and they legitimately believe in, but they know are unpopular, and if they keep talking about them, they will lose, say, the abortion argument. And the moment they win, they turn it back on. As soon as Trump won, he's like, all right, guess what? We're going after those abortion rights, baby. Because that's exactly what he wanted. But he knew enough to turn it off.
How many of those Supreme Court justices were asked about abortion in their confirmation hearing, and they said, I believe that Roe v. Wade is settled law.
Right?
All of them. Literally every single conservative justice that voted to repeal Roe v. Wade, they all said that they believed it was settled law. And they lied, because they knew that once they were in position, they could do whatever they wanted to do. And you didn't see the right coming out and being like, we must take them down. You must rescind them. We can only put forth someone who says that they're going to repeal Roe, because they know how the game is played. And they accept it. And Democrats refuse to play the game. They refuse to be strategic in any way, shape, or form. And as such, we continue to lose. We continue to have purity tests and ideological purity tests as to what sort of candidates we can put forward. And they continue to lose at the national level. That's infuriating. And it is at the core of what we talk about here, which is just strategy. Democrats have to be more strategic. We have to figure out a way to turn off this instinct to just be irrationally angry when someone disagrees or states a position that is not entirely 100% on board with us, and recognize that like the long game is get into power and make changes.
Get into power. That is the goal. Not
Yes.
virtue signaling, not, not being the bigger person in the room. Like, no, that's not the goal. The goal is winning.
Great.
And I guess, like, I agree with you. The guy's point as a whole, he's correct, in terms of, like, what the Democrats need to do. Again, it's that specific statement that I heard in the beginning that, it made me so mad. To hear someone be like, oh, but we're in the right place. Oh, it's just, hearing it that way, it just, again, sounds very excusey to me.
Yeah.
It sounded very excusey to me, like it's an excuse as to why we keep losing. And I'm kind of like, no, we can't just have excuses. Our excuse for like losing is that we suck. That's the reason. I don't want to hear anything else. It's not like, oh, well, like, we're too good to like, and people are too terrible. No. It's because we suck. Deal with it. Get better.
Well, on that note, first and foremost, we would like to extend an invitation to Professor Scott Galloway. If you'd like to come on to the podcast and chat with us, we would love to have you. I think we could have a very interesting discussion.
Absolutely. We'll have you right after Chuck Schumer.
Right after Chuck Schumer. We're still waiting on Chuck to answer our invite.
They say he is still walking to his computer to this day. Just check his email.
He's
slowly.
Yes, well, at least he is not on Signal like Pete Hegseth.
Well, then we know what he's doing.
Yeah, well, this is true. Pete Hegseth, there's also an offer for you to come on the podcast. Please, just don't divulge any secrets along the way.
Or do, I don't know.
Or do, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, so let's move on to our favorite segment, things we should all agree on. And Tyler, you want to start?
Sure. I will start with, and I'm going to be a little careful about how I say this, but my things we should all agree on is that everyone, you should pay attention to the extent that you are able. You should pay attention to your local government or municipality's budget, because it's going to matter more than you may think. Now, in most cities, really, if all cities and towns across the country are going to have some sort of budgetary process that is open to the public every year, right? In which they talk about their fund totals, what department's getting what funds, what's going to be used on or supposed to be used on, et cetera, et cetera. Normally, in a good economy, in a good time, in peacetime, not really that big of a deal. It usually is very minor, and it really only affects people that obviously work in the government. It doesn't really affect the average citizen. But when we start getting into times in which money's tight, the economy is unstable, things are changing at the federal level, things are changing at the state level, that's when you should probably tune in a bit more, because there are cities in our country right now who are in a lot of trouble and are being forced to make a lot of very hard decisions in regards to the budget. And most of those decisions are going to be revolving around elimination of government positions of various types. It could be elimination of government features and government amenities. So if you take advantage of any like government run amenity that you use on a day-to-day life, there's a chance that could be eliminated in a bad budget season as a way to cut costs and bounce back from a deficit. But you might not know what those are until it's too late. So what I'm saying is pay attention to your local city's government so you can know what's happening before it happens in case it affects you. And what I'll say is when the budget starts becoming a problem and like the appropriation of funds starts becoming a problem with it can affect everybody involved. It affects the government, it affects the citizens. But typically the only people who will know about these things and the only people who will speak out are people within the government. And that is never enough because those people cannot make a change and cannot make really that big of a difference by shaking their fist at your mayor or governor about the problems that they're having with the budget. That's not going to affect the mayor's stance because one person holds no power over government. It takes many people. It takes the community has power over the mayor, not one person, no matter who that one person is. That's the beauty of a democracy, right? The power is in the people, as in the many people, not the one person. All this to say, if you see certain alarm bells being raised about things happening within your own government, it might be beneficial to look into that and maybe start becoming a bit more involved in the process. And if you have an issue with the way certain funds are being managed, or the proposed elimination of certain programs that you might benefit from, they're not going to know that it affects you. They're not going to care. They're just going to see money savings. Unless you show up and you make your voice known, it's not going to really, there's nothing in the way of them from making those changes. So pay attention, get involved. If you see people yelling, like, maybe it's time to yell with them because that's the only way these changes can even come to light, right? And anything can really happen as a result of this. So get involved. I know it sounds like a pain in the ass, and it might be, but if you get involved now before it's too late, that might just save some jobs and save some programs in the future. And also help fight corruption, really, because that's how corruption festers, when people don't look.
Yeah, very well said. Seems to be an issue you care quite a bit about. Your local governance. We spend so much time, and rightfully so to a degree, talking about federal government, even statewide races, but we spend so much time with the federal government and understanding your local government and the importance of the roles that they fill and the services that they provide and the nitty-gritty work that they do to make sure that your town or your city or your county function. These public servants are important, and we spend a lot of time, especially in the era of Doge, shitting on bureaucracy, but understanding that these positions are important and that they are doing work on your behalf, and that in many cases these people could be making more money in the private sector, and they're not. Well said, my friend. So I want to talk about patriotism. And that's probably not something that people might expect out of me. But I wrote something this past weekend that I want to share with you all. When I went to Lexington, Massachusetts, as well Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, to celebrate and witness the celebrations relating to the 250th anniversary of the first shots of the American Revolution. And so I wrote what I call What Patriotism Means to Me. And so as I was writing this, I was just a few feet away from where the first shots of the American Revolution were fired. And I thought about the quote that's kind of associated with that moment, which is Captain John Parker crying out, "If they mean to have a war, let it begin here," or so the legend goes. The reality, as with much of American history, is quite different. Captain Parker almost certainly did not say these famous words, as few expected a battle to emerge, much less a war. No one knows who fired the quote-unquote shot heard round the world, but it doesn't really matter. Within a moment, a volley of shots rang out from the British regulars, and the terrified militiamen fled in a panicked retreat. 8 lost their lives, and the British troops pushed forward to Concord. A rousing stand against tyranny it was not. But what followed was truly remarkable. At Concord, American militiamen banded together to avenge their fellow countrymen, as word spread of the deadly events at the Lexington Village Green that morning. What ensued was a very American mess. Women, men, and children banded together with little organization to fire upon the retreating British soldiers as they frantically attempted to return to Boston. Farmers fired from the tree line. Women and children fired from their windows. The people were simply unwilling to accept this attack upon their neighbors. It's easy now to want to disregard the events of that day and of the founding of the nation. This nation, founded in blood and upon the backs of enslaved people, it's not always easy to love. It might be harder now than at any time in recent memory. But I can't help but feel patriotic when I think about those farmers and tradesmen banding together to defend their fellow citizens from harm on that fateful day. These were not all radical individuals hell-bent on American independence, far from it. In truth, it was the attack on their neighbors that called most of them to action. I can't help but feel patriotic when I think about those common people who were willing to put themselves in harm's way to fight for the idea of inalienable human rights, even if the fulfillment of those rights has never been realized for all. I can't help but feel patriotic because true American patriots would oppose everything that the current administration stands for. As I strolled those grounds 250 years later, I was struck by the sacrifice that was made in opposition to tyranny and in defense of a set of core values that allowed the United States, in spite of all its flaws, to become the beacon of social progress for so long. I am simply unwilling to give up more than 2 centuries of progress to a tyrant. I am unwilling to stay silent as our government ignores the Constitution and the rule of law. I am unwilling to stand by and watch as those neighbors that call America home are persecuted and treated as less than human, regardless of where they were born. I am unwilling to accept this as the new normal. So I recognize others may be quick to wonder why anyone would spend the night sitting on a grassy hillside waiting for a ceremonial shot heard round the world at 6 a.m. But I did this, not as a glorification of the people who fought there, but as a tribute to what they fought for, knowingly or unknowingly. May we all have the courage to stand up for our neighbors in their time of need. May we all have the fortitude to refuse to be silent in the face of tyranny and injustice. May we all continue to fight for the ideals of America that have yet to be fully realized and are imperiled once again. That is what patriotism means to me.
Damn, all right. That was fantastic.
Yeah, I will admit that I got very emotional at that event multiple times, but especially so there's a reenactment that goes on, But to see the crowds of people there, I think it's interesting. History nerds, especially military history nerds, we often get associated with kind of far right movements, that we tend to be more politically conservative, and I don't think that's fair. It is certainly true of many of them, but I don't think that that's fair in general. But this was a different environment than what you might have expected, thinking, okay, you're going to a reenactment of an American Revolution battle. And that was evident from the moment that the reenactment kind of was finishing up, and you just heard somebody shout out, "No kings!" And then you just heard it echo throughout from the crowd of thousands of people who had come to witness this, significant moment. And you just heard, "No kings! No kings! Down with the king!" It is remarkable. I went to the Concord Patriots Day Parade, and I saw some really remarkable signs that are criticizing, what we are dealing with today, including, "This is the government that our founders warned us about. We fought against a king 250 years ago. The fight continues." It was really inspiring to me to remember that there are so many of us who are willing to fight against this and push back. This was a historical event that deserves to be mentioned, deserves to be celebrated, a big moment in American history. But it really is the banding together of people to defend their neighbors that inspires me, because it is what we are going to need to do every single day for the next 3 years until we can get these dangerous people hopefully out of office in 2028. We're going to have to continue to fight to protect our fellow residents. And so I got hope from that. And I hope that everyone else does as well. That's patriotism to me. I'm not going to let that word be stolen by these kind of right-wing radicals who wave the flag as if they're the most patriotic people. Meanwhile, some of them beat cops with it on January 6th. I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to accept that. I'm patriotic because I believe in the values of America that we have been striving towards. We have never fully realized, but we have been striving towards them. And I'm not going to cede patriotism to those people, to those other people. But
Here to that. I think you make a great point in the sense where it's important to recognize that you can love this country and be a proud American with a full understanding of its, horrors as well as its, praiseworthy moments.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's expressly if you are a patriotic person who understands those things, who accepts those things, and knows the full picture of it, I think you are arguably the most patriotic person at that point in time, because you have a full understanding and yet still have that belief, and still have the understanding, and that is like perfectly reasonable. Like we see so much, like now more than ever, so much anti-America rhetoric, right? Coming from mostly people on the far left, right? Lots of flag burning and all these things, right? All these like, I hate being here, I want to leave, like this place sucks. It's like, yeah, you have the right to say that, that's fine. But to also like demonize those of us who are patriotic and who are not afraid to be like, yeah, well, no, I'm proud American, that's fine. Like to demonize that is wrong. Because yes, there can be a conflict, but that conflict doesn't necessarily mean you have to be un-American. Because there's a lot about this country to love, a lot about our history to be proud of. There's a song by the Descendants called American, right? Apostrophe American. And I love this song. It's great punk song. The first two lines of the song are we flipped our finger to the King of England, then stole our country from the Indians. And so the song kind of goes into like this kind of oxymoronic viewpoint of America. But what I think is very important about the song that kind of reminds me of your point here is the bridge of the song, which reads that I'm proud and ashamed. Every 4th of July, you got to know the truth before you say that you got pride. And I find that to be a particularly powerful line in the song, particularly just hearing that you got to know the truth before you say that you got pride is particularly impactful to me, because it's not saying that you shouldn't have pride or that that's a bad thing. It's just saying you need to know the whole picture. Because once you hold the whole picture, that will change the way you see it. And that's the only way that you can truly be a patriotic person through and through, right? It's by knowing that full picture and accepting it, right? And saying, yes, all this stuff happened. We think a lot about the current crisis with the Department of Education, which, Trump and Republicans as a whole are trying to actively take away parts of American history, so that all that's kept is this glorified, Disneyified, America that is not, in which like the horrors of slavery aren't barely even mentioned, and all these things. Like, that's disgusting. That's just that's so horrid, because it's disingenuous to the children who will be fed that information in such a way. Because again, how can you say that you got pride if you don't know the truth? It's a lie. At that point in time, it's a lie. So you got to know the truth. And I think that's kind of that part of your musings here that resonated with me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just a final thing on that. What makes me proud to be an American is probably not the same thing as what makes a MAGA person proud to be an American. And we should be able to still acknowledge that you can be proud without being proud of the parts of America that we're not proud of. And if you love something, you can criticize it because you love it. But that doesn't mean that you have to hate on it. And we have rushed to this kind of judgment in many circles in which America sucks. And one of the things that was so charming's probably not the right word, but inspiring and refreshing for me about the excitement that kind of came when Kamala Harris took over the ticket last year in the Democratic convention, which I thought was rather well done, was the fact that you heard Democrats chanting USA. I mean, that's the first time in years that you would have heard that at a Democratic gathering, and it is nice. It was nice to, for that brief moment, feel a sense of optimism among left-leaning people again, relating to the country that we live in, and a sense of pride in the country that we live in. And obviously, the election didn't give us much to be proud of, the results, we should say. And thus far, this administration is not giving us much to be proud of. But they cannot take away some of the significant events of the past, the things that I am proud of in America, and the things that we've done that have made us, as I said, the beacon of social progress on Earth, on this planet. And while we certainly aren't right now, I'm refusing to give up to give up and believe that we can't get back to that point again, because we have to. The world needs the United States to be a leader on social issues, and not a leader in the wrong way. So that's what I got on that. But all All right. Well, that's going to take care of our episode for this week. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate it. I do want to take this moment to remind everyone that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is still imprisoned in El Salvador, and I'm just not going to let this go because this is ridiculous. So if you are getting content with that story, you need to rethink what that story means about the rights of people living in this country and due process. So, but outside of that, thank you all again so much for listening in. We appreciate it, and we want to encourage you, if you like the podcast, please follow us on social media, on Instagram, at Reunited States Pod. And as always, keep the dialogue open. From Manchester, New Hampshire, my name is Jesse Saywell.
And from Los Angeles, California, my name is Tyler Egg.
And this has been Reunited States.
When the whole world has got you down, and there's no one else around, turn that crown right upside